Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Happy Friday. We are now nearing the end of July. It's incredible this summer's flown by. Today, for purposes that are contemporary and purposes that are also academic and evergreen, my friend Ed Mazza, Dr. Edmund Mazza, joins the show to discuss anti-popes, one of the most misunderstood concepts within 2,000 years plus of ecclesial history. Ed, thanks for coming back and discussing anti-popes with us. Maybe you can clarify questions that are in my mind and I think a lot of my audience's mind.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, as our mutual friend, Pat Coffin, likes to say, anti-pope is not the same thing as antichrist.
Sure.
It simply means either someone who is holding the chair in Rome illegitimately, or it means someone who disputed an election and is disputing whoever is sitting in the chair in Rome. And that has happened over 36 times throughout the last 2,000 years.
Is there an official number in the annuarium? I mean, why is this disputed? This is the first question that I can't get straight, is the mathematical issue.
I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, there is, I want to try to demystify that if I can. There is no official, like Denzinger, that, Denzinger would kind of give us the official dogmatic positions of the church. And even that gets revised, believe it or not, from time to time. But there is no official book where you can go look up and see who were the popes and who were the anti-popes. The closest thing we have to that, as you're familiar with, is the annual pontifical almanac, whatever you want to call it, right? And you've got a list of the 265 popes or whatever. You also got the ones that are the anti-popes, but historians advising the Vatican has actually revised that list at least a couple times, to my knowledge. So you could be a pope, an historical pope one day, and then an anti-pope the next day, depending on what the historians have advised the Holy See.
Yeah, there's retroactivity to the validity of papacies, which muddies the water. This is absolutely not one of the not ecclesial indefectible, but the indefectible aspects of the way that chronology works one-sidedly in the church. In other words, who might be called a pope today can be called an anti-pope tomorrow, and it really, really messes things up, which is partly why there's not an official number. I mean, just for the folks out there that are happening to tune in, an anti-pope that, broadly speaking, is a claimant to the throne of Peter that was not the real guy. Now, Ed, you gave a sort of dichotomous a bifurcation in the definition, and that's probably more specific. But generally speaking, an anti-pope is someone that claims the see and doesn't have it. Now, I would say when we think of the probably best two known anti-popes, they're the first two anti-popes at the Avignon, during the Avignon papacy, right? I mean, am I right? This is sort of the paradigm instance, if there can be a paradigm referable thing as a paradigm instance. the two French men who were claiming the throne at the beginning of the Avignon papacy, and entire lives were lived during this 71-year period where people did not know who the Pope was, even St. Vincent Ferrers. Do you agree that these are maybe the closest textbook instances of anti-popes?
It's probably the clearest example that we could kind of give people. And a quick segue, like a few years back, I was at I had an encounter with a very famous Catholic apologist he read me the riot act for having the temerity to say that Francis was not a valid pope. And he said, look, the entire College of Cardinals has accepted him. Who are you to judge, so to speak?
Right.
And in the case of what I
know what you're talking about, by the way, but we mentioned names. Yeah.
In the case that you just raised, in the September of 1378, an unlettered lay nothing, a woman named Catherine of Siena, wrote a letter to the Italian cardinals because literally the entire College of Cardinals was backing that first anti-pope in the episode that you're talking about, Cardinal Robert of Geneva, I think it was. And she said, you guys supported this devil and he's not the Pope. I mean, who was Catherine of Siena to judge? But anyway, because the real Pope was, well, I say real Pope because most historians would say that second conclave that elected Robert was illegitimate. And then he died, and then the real Pope died, and then successors came and took their places. And then ultimately, was it the Council of Pisa, gave us the former pirate, who was the third anti-pope, so to speak, or the second anti-pope. And he was backed by the Medici in Florence, which is interesting. And he actually has his own little tomb in, is it in the cathedral or in the baptistry? I'll have to double check on that. But yeah, you never know how you're going to end up as an anti-pope.
Yeah, that's kind of the name of the game. And that's why we have real questions today that hopefully you can help clarify. As a church historian, I taught church history for 10 years, but I still have a lot of questions about is this a distinction of kind or is it a distinction of degree? I guess it is a distinction of degree that becomes a distinction of kind once the Pope acknowledges it as such. Okay, so let me ask you this. What are the biggest myths, if you're having to typify misconceptions, that sense of myth, about of or concerning anti-popes that you hope readers will abandon? Because you have a new book, right? You have a new book about this. And what are the biggest myths you're hoping to dispel?
Well, first, two or three things. The first one is that, again, an anti-pope is not simply someone who lost a disputed election and either is occupying the throne of Rome or is trying to occupy it. But also, there's a certain category of anti-popes, or I should say legitimate popes, that were thought to be anti-popes without a disputed election, but merely because of the apparent heterodoxy and promoting heresy, actually, that these who turn out to be legit popes were giving out at the time. And I guess that's the second thing reason I wrote the book, to kind of rock the boat for the church today, is I wanted to push back from a historical perspective and say that this approach that a lot of people are taking, that, well, it's not my place as a layperson to opine on whether the person sitting in the chair in Rome is a valid pope or not. I've got example after example from canonized saints who that is precisely what they did, was to raise the issue of whether this person is a pope or an anti-pope because of the way that they were behaving towards the faith and towards actually, in some cases, towards society, which we can get into a concrete example if you want.
Parish Urbans and Retrogrades, before we go on with this exciting show, I wanted to remind you about the precious metals that are on sale today from St. Joseph Partners Precious Metals. St. Joseph protected the Holy Family with great prudence, with great abundant provision. Today, St. Joseph Partners helps you to do the same with physical gold and silver. This is how you can shore up your family's future. It's faith-based, it's transparent, no games. Protect your family's future. Visit stjosephpartners.com or call 610-326-2000. St. Joseph Partners, guarding wealth with integrity. Okay. Yeah, I sorry. Oh, we're getting into some more ad reads here, and there are two businesses that I greatly value. It's St. Joseph and, of course, Real Estate for Life that help us to accomplish the mission of re-achieving subsidiarity here at Rules for Retrogrades. So, Ed, I wanted to ask. You said you're going to specify a couple examples. Yeah, and I'm very interested in you doing that.
Sure. Okay. So real quick, in the 500s, Emperor Justinian, who was like the most powerful man in the world, strong-armed the papacy into the Second Council of Constantinople, the Fifth Ecumenical Council, which called into question the orthodoxy of certain theologians. And because of the outcome of that, and because it made it look like, it gave the appearance that the council was trying to placate the Monophysite heretics. Long story short, in the West, the Italians and others, bishops, withdrew communion from the Pope at the time. It was a short-lived schism, and this was the time of the great Irish missionaries to the pagans in Europe.
Yep.
And Saint
Augustine of Canterbury, was it?
That's true. Yes. This is around that time.
Okay.
And
just taking a guess.
Sorry?
I was just taking a guess.
No. That's the same period we're talking about. But Saint Columban,
yeah,
who lived from 540 to 615, actually addressed Pope Boniface IV, who ruled from 608 to 615. And he basically tells him in a letter that we have that he says, "I summon you, remove the cloud of suspicion from St. Peter's chair, call a conference so that you may clear the charges laid against you, for you are alleged to favor heretics. For they say that Eutyches, Nestorius, and Dioscorus, old heretics, as we know, were favored at some council," the council we were just talking about, under Vigilius, Pope Vigilius. And he goes on to say, St. Columban, a canonized saint, goes on to say to Pope Boniface, if you have gone along with this, and if you have made your first faith void, justly do your subordinates oppose you, and justly do they hold no communion with you. And he says, even if they seem to be your subordinates, those who have kept the Catholic faith, since they have never favored or supported any heretics or suspect persons, they shall be your judges. Now, he goes on to state, against the Protestants and against the Orthodox, he says Rome is the head of the churches of the world. But he says to him, take care lest you lose your dignity, in other words, lose your office, through some mistake, for power will be in your hands just so long as your principles remain sound. For he is the appointed key bearer of the kingdom of heaven, who opens by true knowledge to the worthy and shuts to the unworthy. Otherwise, if he does the opposite, he shall be able neither to open nor to shut. In other words, if you're promoting heresy or heretics, you will lose the power of the keys and you will be an anti-pope. I mean, he doesn't use that word, but that's the implication. So that's one sort of obscure example from the Dark Ages, really the darkest part of the Dark Ages.
Yes. Yeah. It's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Another example I bring up in chapter 1 of the book is, again, a lesser known period of history when, due to what you might call salutary neglect, the emperors, the kings, even the lords of feudal Europe were appointing the bishops of the Catholic Church without a direct papal sanction, right? And not only that, they were investing them with the spiritual symbols of their office. Now, they did this because the bishops at that time helped to administer their domains. Again, I don't want to go too deep into medieval history here, but so long story short, it led to this knockdown, drag out struggle when you get the reform popes who push back against this sort of takeover of the takeover of the spiritual by the temporal. Now, this was eventually worked out at the Concordat of Worms in 1022, I believe. No, 1122. But before that happened, there was a particular instance which we focus on in the book, and that is the instance of Pope Paschal II. Pope Paschal II, when the German emperor came to Rome, seemed to go along with this, what they called investiture, lay investiture. And there were several churchmen, canonized saints, who thought this was heresy or something close to heresy. And we have the example of Saint Hugh, Saint Yves, and Saint Godfrey. These were all French bishops. And what they did was they held a council in France, I guess a synod, a local council, where they told the Pope in a letter that if you don't condemn what the emperor is doing, because at one point the emperor actually held him prisoner and then released him, but even after he was released, he still didn't condemn what was the lay investiture.
Yeah.
They said, look, if you don't do this, which was the exact phrase here, it says, the exact quote, if, as we absolutely do not expect, you, meaning Pope Paschal, choose another way, and you refuse to confirm the decisions of our authority, meaning this local French synod, may God help us, for thus you, Pope Paschal, will be separating us from obedience to you.
Right.
Meaning he's an anti-pope. We don't have to be in communion with him because he's a heretic and he lost his office. Now, fortunately for history, he confirmed what the council taught, that, this business of allowing lay people, meaning emperors and kings and lords, to invest the bishops with their spiritual symbols is not allowed. So these are just two examples where legit popes, I mean, in the first case I gave you with St. Columban against Pope Boniface IV, Boniface IV is actually a canonized saint himself. So you have a canonized saint accusing a canonized saint of being an anti-pope because of the appearance of favoring heresy. But the proviso is always this. Like Columban said, if this is true, then you are an anti-pope. Or in the case of these three canonized saints from France, again, Saint Hugh, Saint Yves, Saint Godfrey, they said to him, if you don't confirm the faith that as we're expressing it, then you would be an anti-pope and we could break communion with you, or rather you would be forcing us to break communion with you because you're an anti-pope. So anyway, there's always a proviso when you're dealing with this situation, and therefore, as it turns out, they were both legit popes, not anti-popes.
So investiture, simony, other articles of politics, kings, emperors, powerful families. If you had to typify across all the 36 plus anti-popes that you characterize, you don't characterize all of them in your book, what general rule, in a word, in a line, what role do they play in the formation and sustenance of the existence of anti-popes throughout history?
Whenever someone is not walking according to the faith, or gives the appearance of it, that person is giving the appearance that he or she has lost their office. So that's the red signal. That's the red flag. Now, as I say, there's a whole other category of anti-popes where it wasn't a matter that they were departing from orthodoxy. It was a matter of they were disputing who had the right canonical or valid conclave to elect that person. Actually, there's one case that overlaps both of these things. I could throw that out there if you want. It gets a little interesting because there's an anti-Semitic or there's a Jewish aspect to this. So
More.
not
Always spices things up.
Yeah. Not long after, I mean, if they had Twitter back then, whoa, look out. But there was another election not long after the incident that we just talked about with the three French bishops and Pope Paschal. But the cardinal who was actually Pope Paschal's negotiator with the temporal authority, with the emperor, was actually a cardinal whose grandfather and great-grandfather were from a Jewish banking family. And on February 14th, Valentine's Day, in the year of our Lord 1130, in order to avert this individual from getting elected pope, a secret cabal of electors got together.
Oh, you've told me this before.
Yeah.
We talked about it a year ago. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
They failed to inform the rest of the electors that the reigning pope had died. All right. So the body's not even cold, and it was uncanonical for that reason. You're not allowed to anyway. They had an election, and they elected Innocent, a man who took the name Innocent II.
Right.
When later that day, when the other electors and Romans found out about that, they did their own election, and they elected Anacletus II, the third generation removed Jew. So he actually took the chair of Peter. And he had the backing of one of the rival families of Rome. Rome at that time was kind of controlled by two different rival families. Actually, for a lot of the period of the history of Rome, that was the case. But Innocent had to go, pound sand. He had to go flee. But he had a powerful intercessor in St. Bernard of Clairvaux. And Bernard of Clairvaux, who, was probably the most famous Cistercian, and he was an abbot, and he cajoled and persuaded the kings of France and England, and ultimately the Holy Roman Emperor in Germany, to accept Innocent as the Pope in exile. And even though Anacletus ruled from Rome for 8 years, they said he's an anti-pope. And when you read the letters of Bernard, he makes a glancing attempt to defend the validity of the election of Innocent, but his main thing for rejecting Anacletus as, quote unquote anti-pope, is that the guy is a Jew, and it's an impiety against Christ that a Jew should sit on the chair of Peter. And a couple of times, Bernard even got the Holy Roman Emperor to invade Italy and try to take over the See of Rome. But the only counterbalance at that time was southern Italy, which was controlled by the Norman kingdom, the Normans. And the Norman king was the brother-in-law of the Pope, I believe. And so he was able to take back the chair for Anacletus. Anyway, the whole thing ends when Anacletus dies, and then they elect a successor to him. But Bernard comes down, gives him a tongue lashing, And then he steps down and allows Innocent to finally occupy the chair in Rome. And I go into this in more detail in my book. But and then the bottom line here is that Innocent II calls the Second Lateran Council. And this is, to my knowledge, this is the only example of this. He calls the Second Lateran Council, and one of the canons of that council specifically says that Anacletus was an usurper, and then all his appointments are null and void. Now, we generally believe that ecumenical councils of the Catholic Church are infallible. I don't know if you want to make that argument about prudential judgments or things that are not related to salvation in terms of this wasn't a dogmatic issue, but anyway. So that's a serious thing when you have an ecumenical council of the church saying that this previous occupier of the chair of Peter was actually an antipope.
And that's precisely what muddies the water further, isn't it? I mean, it kind of anything that the church has taught or allowed to be discovered through the annals of history. I got to be careful the way I pronounce that word. The annals of history. The anal glands of history seems to muddy rather than clarify, doesn't it? I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't get a lot clearer, and people can't ever hang their hat on, the fact that, let's fast forward into the future. So you and Patrick Coffin and others have expressed confidence that Pope Francis was an anti-pope. And I expressed at the time a fair amount of entertainment of the notion. I thought it was conceptually plausible, philosophically coherent. We'll say that. But then when at the end of the Francis pontificate and at the end of the interregnum, the whatever sedevacante period, then we saw the so-called good guys, Cardinal Burke, Cardinal Sarah, Cardinal, who's the surviving German dubia cardinal? That would be
Brandmüller.
Brandmüller, yeah, Cardinal Brandmüller. Even, I guess, throw in Cardinal Mueller as one of the good guys when they abstained to hold the special council or whatever it would take to be the equivalent of the Council of Pisa to write the anti-papal ship. Antipopal ship. Yeah, I just thought, okay, well, this is kind of a dead horse. And it seems even like you mentioned our mutual friend Patrick Coffin, seems like even he's accepted that Pope Leo XIV is Pope. So without getting all the way into it, I mean, I'm not trying to poke the bear, but like Pat, I mean, everyone was kind of watching Patrick. And he might respond to this or something. I can just send him a text. I've asked him a few times since then. Well, what you seem to be calling Pope Leo XIV, Pope Leo XIV, not a cardinal, the equivalent of Cardinal Bergoglio anymore. So where do you come out on this? And is there any place that we can hang our hat, or is this an historically, chronologically unfalsifiable question? Like, can you always just push the ball back and be like, well, the special conclave of cardinals that announces an anti-pope, the Council of Pisa equivalent, will be sometime in the future? That Kierkegaardian eureka, where he's like, the future, the last refuge of the intellectual scoundrel is the future will show I'm right. And there's never a dead date on the future, is there? So is there ever a dead date on this process of anti-papal declarations, or does it just go on ad infinitum?
Precisely. That is the question. Why don't you ask me a nice softball question like, do you still beat your wife?
Yeah. Making you speak for yourself, probably the hardest conceptual rock hard space you could be in. I'm making you answer for
that's
our
fine. No, that's good.
Coffin. Yeah, let me also have you stop beating your wife. Yeah,
sure.
Lately,
well,
ish.
Now, I am an admirer of is it a 4-step move to prove the truth of Catholicism against sola scriptura? Yeah,
the Scholar's Mate, I called it, because it's a 4-step technique. Yeah.
I've got something similar again in the book with regard to this issue. So there are over 300 theologians who on some level have grappled with the issue of what do you do if the Pope is a heretic? And as you point out, some of these guys, John of St. Thomas and others, say, well, you need an imperfect council to get together and declare that the Pope is no longer Pope, that he's a heretic, and therefore he doesn't have jurisdiction. And this has come up, over the last couple of years, obviously.
Of course.
And there's even an article where I went back and forth with Father Brian Harrison over in the pages of digital pages of 1 Peter 5. I don't want to mischaracterize his position, but I think that's the position he takes, is that there has to be some authority to declare it, and until that happens, Francis, or in this case Leo, would still have jurisdiction. Now, there's another school, Robert Bellarmine, Suarez, and others, who say no, quoting Pope Innocent III from the 1200s, they say no, the Pope automatically loses his office from the moment that he is a manifest public heretic. Now, people have brought this up, and ever since the Francis so-called pontificate, and you know what? All of this is moot. And why do I say it's moot? Because all these 300 plus theologians have predicated their arguments on the Pope being a heretic as a private teacher, so to speak, not qua Pope. And as you know, in Amoris Laetitia, for example, Francis says not only that adulterers can receive communion, but that the fact that they continue in their adultery is something that God positively wills, right?
Yeah.
The proportionalism, or not proportionalism, whatever that progressive theological approach would say, right? Your
wise will versus permissive will. Yeah. Evil,
so anyway,
wise will. And
then, of course, he approved the Argentine bishops' guidelines about his apostolic exhortation, and then he put it into the Acta Apostolica Sedis, which normally people have said, well, that makes it magisterial. So where am I going with this? The fact of the matter is, again, no one can name me a single theologian or saint who taught that a pope qua pope can teach heresy. Therefore, if you have such a thing, it means that he is not pope. You can't have a square circle. Now, I get into the weeds on this in the book. Even Pope John Paul II says, like, I'll give you an example. A guy I admire in many ways, Ed Feser, the philosopher, Thomistic philosopher, teaches here in Southern California. He's got articles where he says, I'm paraphrasing, that, Francis has taught this wrong about the death penalty. He's taught that wrong. But, popes can teach error in their ordinary magisterium. It doesn't happen that often. And Francis is the most prolific and really is sort of an outlier in the 2,000-year history of the church. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, he's still pope because this can happen in the ordinary magisterium. And as I point out in the book, John Paul II taught that the pope, even in his ordinary magisterium, is not teaching as a private teacher, but he's teaching as pope. And again, in the history of the church, no one can name for me any saint or theologian who said that the pope can teach heresy as pope, qua pope.
Here's the problem, though. Yeah. Of course, these are pious opinions. No one's ever been able to, and I'm interested in this topic. I'm open to the topic, but no one's ever been able to name for anyone to enumerate where in the magisterium it says that a pope who teaches heresy, depopes himself. That's the problem.
Well, in chapter 2 of my book, I point out that Pope Innocent III taught this. Now, do you want to say that's magisterial or not? I mean, it's a pope teaching this.
That's better than nothing. And I've never heard of that. Again, I've taught church history. You are a church historian. I taught church history for 10 years. I'm academically, when it comes down to the actual bona fides, I would have teaching at the university level. I could teach Aristotelian Thomist philosophy. You're the actual historian, so I'm pleased to give you that one. But the problem is, has that been habitually taught? And what is the expectation of? I mean, I debate this with the Ortho Bros. The first millennium papacy is what it was in the second millennium papacy, is what it was in the late second millennium Pastor Eternus, Bishop Gasser intervention papacy. There's really no change. And the thing is, there's really, I hate to say it, a magisterial naivete about, well, what happens if any one of these 267 guys cats, popes, holy fathers, pulls an Amoris Laetitia, and there is a shocking silence for one direction or the other on it. And there's a lot of ambivalence, even from the guys in your. I don't know what Pat Coffin's view is on Pope Leo XIV, but there's kind of logical discontinuities in seemingly every direction. I mean, people don't want to. Now, for as long as he shall live, our friend Patrick Coffin, is he conceptually bound by the presupposition that all of the popes in the lineage? What if we get Pope Leo XV after Leo XIV, who I don't think is a good pope or man? And Leo XV is like based beyond base, like Pius X or Pius V levels of base. Well, then it's going to be really tempting to say, oh, that's a valid lineage of kings, a valid lineage of popes. What I'm bothered by, and we can pull back out of this some. We'll take a couple questions, a couple one-line questions from the audience if they want to ask you this. They're probably going to.
If you guys want to join the show, there is a link in chat, so feel free to start queuing up now.
Yeah, but I mean, to pull back a little bit to a more 30,000-foot view.
Sure.
There's simply not really a satisfying answer either way, but that doesn't mean that there is a principle of excluded middle here. And it's just, well, I'm going to assume that there just are some really, really bad popes in these seculum obscurums. And I'm not sure how people ever get over the hump, the activation energy requisite to get to your position or Patrick Coffin's position or Ann Barnhart's position for that matter.
Well, that leads me to my second chess move, akin to the one that you use with Sola Scriptura. And that is that again, this is the realm of the theologians, right? I'll give you two examples: Ludwig Ott and Karl Rahner, right? The two,
yeah, not usually in the same breath, except as
exactly
foils, conceptual foils, yeah.
But they actually agree on one thing, or at least in Karl Rahner's article from 1947. He wrote an article on Pope Pius XII's encyclical, as you know, on the mystical body, where Pius says that apostates, schismatics, and heretics do not belong to the visible church. And Karl Rahner, and again, you can look it up in the Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma by Ludwig Ott and others. The overwhelming majority of theologians, as of that time, pre-Vatican II, taught that not just formal heretics, but material heretics. In other words, Catholics in good conscience, not Catholics in good conscience, but so in order to be guilty of the mortal sin of heresy, you would have to be a formal heretic, right? If you are just a material heretic, you're not culpable, but what Ludwig Ott and Karl Rahner both teach, you're not a member of the visible body of Christ. What's the problem with that? If you're not a member of the visible body of Christ, you can't hold office in the Catholic Church. It's a metaphysical thing. This is why we don't consider Protestants to be members of the visible body of the church, because there are, probably countless Protestants who are material heretics in good faith. In other words, they're not formal in the sense that they know the truth and they're rejecting the truth, so to speak. I mean, I guess I'm giving the post-Vatican II extension of grace and charity here, but you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so the point is, Cardinal Muller, Bishop Strickland, and others taught that Francis was, at minimum, a pusher of material heresy, and it has to be public, by the way. It can't be private or occult, hidden. It's got to be a public manifest. Even material heresy is enough for a bishop or a pope to lose their office. He's an incapable subject of holding office in the Catholic Church. So that's my other argument there, that, again, we would have to admit, if you want to say that a material heretic can hold office in the Catholic Church, you'd have to admit that the Protestants are, in fact, members of the visible body of Christ by the same token. It's like a two-step process, right? The first one is, are you or are you not a member of the visible body of Christ? Now, everybody agrees that formal heretics are not. 90% of Catholic theologians before Vatican II said if you're a material heretic, you're still not a member of the visible body of church. But then the corollary from that, and that's why they don't admit Protestants as members of the visible church, because they're material heretics, if not formal heretics. But the corollary from that is, if you are not a member of the visible body of Christ, well, then you can't hold office in the church. So that's the dilemma.
Yeah, it begs the question a bit. I'll have to think about that one and get back to you. There's a bit of question begging going on as a formal petitio principia there, but I don't have it right now. Sure. I'll say this. This much I can say with certitude. When my family and I moved from California to Mississippi, that was an instance of what I call getting out of the reddest of the red, getting the bluest of the blue. If you want to do the same, go to www.realestateforlife.org, and a pro-life, pro-Catholic person will help you get out of your blue state and get to a red state today. That's www.realestateforlife.org. Also, if you are watching this video, like it, subscribe to it, leave a comment. And if you subscribe to it, you might as well click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you want to support this channel even further, Locals, rules for retrogrades at Locals is the way to do it. And if you want to support the channel even a bit more, what we have in the offing is a second documentary associated with the channel. Everyone knows that What a Woman Is was our documentary that is now owned by CandaceOwens.com. That was the translation of my book, The Case for Patriarchy. We are in the process of working with another different, very big name to distribute a second documentary. This will be my first book, Catholic Republic. And if, we have a number of executive producers, but if you'd like to be a donor to the film, an accredited donor in a list of donors appearing at the end of the film, then you can go to Give, Send, Go, look at this link, and help us to make it. We've already raised money through executive producers, but just donors on Give, Send, Go, it'll be exciting, and it will be as good as What a Woman Is on CandaceOwens.com. If you haven't seen the latter, then go check it out. So we're gonna put this thing together starting very soon. I've got the team assembled, and we're getting ready to start filming it. Thank you. Okay, Ed. This is so. I guess I'll let the people, because people are peppering you with questions. I guess the takeaway question for me, the takeaway principle for me is a takeaway question. If you could, maybe tell me in a nutshell, what do you want, if people read your new book, and tell them where they can go get it, by the way, what do you want them to really understand about the last 7 popes? That traces it from the post-conciliar period, 1958, but especially the last pope or two. What's the takeaway principle? And were there So that's part A, and part B, and then we're going to take some audience questions. Were there any self-assumptions that were challenged when you did the citations for this book, wrote the book? Was there anything that surprised you when you're looking at primary sources to research and write this thing? Writing a book is a tremendous undertaking. Through the grace of God, I've gotten through it 5 times. You have now, what, four books under your name, or 3?
3.
3. It's just such a tremendous undertaking. I always try to stump people's books because, unless we're talking Aleister Crowley or something, but because it's such a tremendous undertaking. People that haven't written a book don't know what a big undertaking it is, because you have to research so much. So the second part of my question is, what assumptions of yours as a Beneplanist were challenged, if any, as you wrote this, or were they all a fortiori?
Right. Well, I'll deal with the first question first, and that is that folks can get the book. It's Saints versus Antipopes. Yeah, you can get it at Amazon. There's a Kindle version for $10, or you can get the paperback version for $19.99, whatever. A few months ago, it was the best-selling Catholic book after the Bible and the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Interest has waned a little bit since then, but one of the things you'll get for getting it is you'll get an argument against sedevacantism, because in your first question you asked about the last 7 popes or whatever, the conciliar popes. I do make a distinction in there why I argue that John the 23rd, Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict the 16th are valid, legit popes according to the teaching of the church and saints, whereas you can argue that there's a qualitative difference when it comes to Bergoglio and to Prevost. So I could say a couple words on why I think that the conciliar popes are popes. But to answer your second question, was there something that I came across in my research for the book that made me, rethink my assumptions, or, how to tread with this, right? I guess off the top of my head was this notion, as you said earlier, that a lot of things are unsettled. That, for example, the list of popes can change depending on, who's advising the current Holy See, what to put in the Pontifical Annuario.
It's frustrating.
It's frustrating because you'd like to be on more solid ground. And this by no means is a knock against our faith. I mean, Jesus Christ established the Catholic Church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. So whatever unsettling things that I've uncovered, it doesn't faze my faith or anything. But what I tried to do in the book was to question my assumptions and make sure that, there's like 100 footnotes in here, make sure that I was reading a wide array of sources to make sure I wasn't being, having tunnel vision. I don't know if that helps.
Well, okay. So the last word for me, and then I know you also are doing some fall classes, so go ahead and stump those. And then we'll take 3 really fast questions from the audience, like one-liners, because I know people have a lot of questions on this for you. We're going to fit in what I think Steph thinks are the best 3. But just for clarification, this is not like a last-minute Columbo gotcha question, but I mean, you are, as a matter of fact, a type of sedevacantist. You're not a 1958 sedevacantist, but you're a 2013 sedevacantist. Yeah, I mean that people don't. It doesn't have to date to 1958, right? It can date to 2013 or whatever it was, 2012, 2015. Yeah.
Well, I prefer the term interregnumist because I think that the chair has been vacant since the first day of January 2023, which was only, some 3 odd years ago. So we've got a few decades to go before I could be accused of denying the indefectibility of the church, like the Sedes.
My bad. Yeah, you get 10 extra years in there. Okay. You squeeze them into Benedict 16. However, in your studies of history, you said there's over 36 anti-popes. Were any of them, did time accrue under any non-claimants to the throne? It always was a claimant. Did you ever have a guy like Benedict 16 explicitly denouncing that he was Pope that turned out to be Pope for that time? Because I've never seen it as a church history guy. Now you're more the historian, but I never have seen it. And I looked. And also, that's question A. And then question B is, we've had Secula Obscura before, but we've never had them for longer than 2, 3, 4 years, right? We've never had them for 10 plus years.
Correct. The longest interregnum that we've had is, I think, about 3 years, almost 3 years. The first part of your, can you just run the first part of the question by me again?
Yeah, it was, has there ever been a Pope who was posthumously or ex post facto installed, who was a non-claimant to the throne for several of the years, the way that Benedict XVI would be after 2013?
So there's the most glaring thing that comes up is the one I gave you, the one that's in chapter 2 in my book, is Anacletus, that he actually ruled from Rome for 8 whole years and died in the chair, and was subsequently condemned as an anti-pope usurper by the Second Lateran Council.
Sure, but that's sort of the contrapositive to what I'm asking. I'm asking, has there ever been a pope who was pronounced de facto pope because of the writ of annulment or whatever you call it on the papacy, the supposed papacy of an anti-pope, who was explicitly saying, I'm not pope? I've never seen that.
You mean, so I forgive my slowness here. So you're referring back to like Benedict XVI saying, look, I resigned properly. All these rumors about my being pope are ridiculous. Is that?
Yeah. He's explicitly saying every way he can, in plain language, I am not pope. I resigned that thing. It was I'm tired. Is it 2012 or 2013? I resigned it in early 2013. Spring 2013. Okay. So yeah, February 27th, 2013, I think. Yeah. Right. Well, is there any precedent for that? Because I've never found it.
Yeah. Well, again, Ratzinger and Rauner, it sounds like a Nazi vaudeville act. They were
interventionists. Yeah.
They were thick as thieves back in the day. And Vigano, in one of his letters, says that he spoke to Brandmüller, and Brandmüller told him that back in the early 70s, Ratzinger was totally on board with Rauner's idea that you could have multiple people holding the Petrine authority. I can give you. I think
Ingo Dollinger said that too. I get that, but nevertheless, has there ever been an instance of a pope who was installed over his loud, explicit protests after following upon an anti-papacy?
Not that I'm aware of. This would be a unique instance of that.
Yeah, and first times happen. I'm not saying it's conceptually incoherent.
What I would add to that, though, is 2 things. One, folks are probably familiar with the prophecy of Malachi, which actually doesn't kind of get published until the end of the 16th century. Pope Benedict attributed that to either St. Philip Neri or the circle around him. And of course, there are these one-line sentences about all the different popes that are going to succeed until the end of the era, so to speak. And if that was the case, Benedict would actually be the last pope on the list. There was a priest who wrote a book in the 1950s analyzing the prophecies of Malachi. And according to his calculations, the last pope should finish in 2012. Now, I found that interesting because it's in 2012 that Ratzinger made the decision to resign. The other thing is that Ganswein referred to Benedict's action as not the same thing as Celestine V, who just simply retired from the papacy. Ganswein tried to argue that the papacy itself had been fundamentally transformed as a result of what Benedict did. It was an enlargement of the Petrine authority. Now, it's the first time for everything. Nobody's ever tried to do that in the 2,000-year history of the church.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to go to audience questions,
Sure.
but like, it's just, I don't know what to do. I don't have the categories for that kind of claim. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, when I met my wife, my capacity for love and happiness both changed from circular shaped to orthogonal. Like, people, what is that? The shape of the papacy transform. I just don't. I'm a math and philosophy guy, so I want claims that are claimable, you know, that are fundamentally scrutable and understandable. So I know that the European cardinals tend to write like that. I don't know what that means.
No.
It was weird. I don't know if it fundamentally transformed. This isn't like a palpable thing that we can go measure, that the papacy changed shape or something.
Yeah. And then there is that obscure passage in 2 Thessalonians where St. Paul says that what's holding back the era of the Antichrist is the catechon.
Catechon, yeah.
He says, first he describes it as a thing, and then he describes it as a who, as an individual. Many scholars, I go into this in my first book, The Third Secret of Fatima and the Synodal Church, Volume 1, Pope Benedict's Resignation. I argue in one of those chapters in my book that you could make the argument that it's the papacy that is the catechon that's been holding back the darkness and holding back the appearance of the anti-church. You know, the ape of the church that Bishop Fulton Sheen talked about and other people have talked about, right? So that Ratzinger stepping aside was the catechon no longer holding back the darkness. So there would be there's a first time for everything. I mean, this would be the moment when that happened, so to speak. And that would actually be in line with what certain apparitions have talked about. I mean, Our Lady of La Salette, and I go into this in the book, Our Lady of La Salette says there's going to be 2 worm-ridden popes, so to speak. Our Lady of Akita actually had something very interesting to say. If you read the writings of Sister Sasagawa's spiritual director, Father Yasuda, but I'll leave that for the reader.
Yeah, I don't know what a worm. I always hear that, you know, and people are, what's a word? Worm-ridden pope. Does that mean you know, these just, no one. It's not like me as a personal or intellectual deficiency. When I say I don't have the categories for that, I'm really trying to nicely say no one does. This doesn't mean anything. Like, it's not scrutable. So we can't make a logistical judgment based on, oh, that's a worm-ridden pope. Like, unless there's a pope that comes out and he's got worms all over him, like Vecna or something from Stranger Things, then it really doesn't, it's not particularly useful. I agree with you. I mean, when you're in the realm of private revelation, things get a little murky, but this is more concrete. Before Melanie died, she told the Abbé Combe, who wrote The Secret of Melanie in the early 1900s, he asked her about the line where it says that the church will be eclipsed. What did that mean? And Melanie told him that it means they will not know who is the Pope. Okay, that's better. That's better. All right, I can get hip with that. All right, well, let's take 3 really fast questions for Dr. Mazza, because he's a vastly knowledgeable church historian, among other things, among you know, polemicists for recent history. That, you know, I think you're one of the more compelling beneplenists for what it's worth. I don't believe what you believe, but people want to ask. So let's get out 3 questions. They can either be Steph, you leading the, they're 4. Okay, we'll do 4.
Okay, let's do, we have 2 callers, but we'll get through these super chats real fast. DSMP7 says, how do we know who the true Pope was during the Great Western Schism, aside from what was believed after the fact? What does the layman do in the future if there are multiple claimants to the throne and both seem legitimate?
Excellent question. Again, St. Catherine said that the real Pope was the Pope, and that the second conclave that they did to elect the Antipope was you can't do a do-over. If you follow that principle, then whoever held the Roman line, because it didn't end for 40 years, you could argue whoever had the Roman line of succession was the true Pope, even though at one point there were 3 competing men all claiming to be Pope at the same time. Pope Gregory, I think it was Gregory the 12th, he resigned and allowed the Council of Constance to elect Pope Martin in something like the year 1418, 1419. So this way there was unquestionably a new pope. So that could conceivably happen again one day, where all the popes either resign or are dethroned, and then a new pope is elected who is indisputably the pope.
Thank you. Let's see. Bruce Wayne says, not an anti-pope question, but with the back and forth between the Vatican and SSPX rebuttal, will there be a trial by the court of the Holy See to finalize this, or is it a finality because Rome has spoken?
Well, I don't know as to, again, a trial by the court or what the canon law is in these cases. I know that certain prelates have pointed out that making a bishop without the authority of the Holy See does not fall under the category of schism, but it falls under a different category in canon law.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing I'll say is something that Tim and I actually brought up in a show maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I gave the example of Bishop Nestorius of Constantinople, who in his Christmas sermon in Hagia Sophia said that Mary is not the mother of God. And a layman, a lawyer, stood up and said, Eusebius, I think was his name, said, that's heresy. Now, this was before the Council of Ephesus that defined that Mary is the mother of God. She is the Theotokos. So Nestorius excommunicated him, excommunicated other people for not being in communion with him. But when Pope Celestine wrote to Nestorius, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the minute that you yourself fell into heresy, you didn't have the jurisdiction to excommunicate anybody. So if somebody wants to...
He said that?
Yeah, I can give you the exact words. I'm paraphrasing.
Text it to me. Text it to me. That's good. That's
the argument I would give the SSPX, is that if Leo has promoted heresy, if Tuccio has promoted heresy, then from the moment they started promoting heresy, they didn't have the jurisdiction to excommunicate anybody.
Well, I would say that's vastly more important for the things we were talking about all day. People know, I think SSPX, for better or worse, has a vastly outsized influence. Is really not as important for better or worse as people say, but that seems to have a bearing on the pious opinions we were banding about earlier. So I would have to think about that one.
Sure.
Okay, so first caller, we'll have Bob P. Bob, I'm going to add you to the stage.
Thanks for calling in, guys. Fast questions, fast question, fast answer.
How you doing, guys? So I have a quick question for the doc. So I have this friend, whenever you offer any sort of polite criticism of any sort of clergy or any sort of pope, he just becomes enraged. And even if you explain there's a difference between criticism and disrespect, he doesn't want to hear it. And his only sort of comeback is, you're not clergy, you're laity, shut up. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with something like that? How do you have a productive conversation with someone who just has that emotional response?
Hasn't studied a lot of church history. Well, I'll refer to Dr. Mazza, but
yes, what you do is you have them buy my book, Saints versus Antipopes, and in Appendix 2, I have 4 pages of St. Catherine of Siena lacing into the man that the entire College of Cardinals said was the Pope. Again, she's an unlettered lay nothing. She's a woman, and she's presuming to not only call this guy a devil and the son of the devil, but also the cardinals themselves. Actually, she doesn't curse like a sailor. It's like a sailor, but she does use very strong language. So perhaps that would be, if we're supposed to emulate the saints, then that's an education.
Oh, cool. All right. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for calling in, Bob.
thanks, Bob.
Next is Philippe. Hello,
right.
sir.
So, Philippe.
All right, thank you. I'll try to be quick. So I guess I just had a question about, you were using the term material heretic, and I guess I was understanding it differently, because I always thought material heretic just meant, you had something that kind of contradicted, the doctrine, the dogma, or whatever. But like the way it was described to me, at least, it was sort of like, there's some people, a lot of people are material heretics because they just don't know the doctrines, especially when you get to like Trinitarian doctrines and things like that, monoenergisms and, the meaning of a persona, things like that. Like they don't even understand it. And like, I even had like a theology professor saying like, you know, we're all material heretics at some point because we don't understand the doctrines well enough. And there's also the problem of being a material heretic just because something hasn't been defined yet. So I'm a material heretic. You know, you could be, I don't know, like, what's the word? Like Mary is the mediatrix of all graces. That hasn't been defined yet, you know? So you could think, well, I don't think she's the mediatrix of all graces for whatever reason. But later on, they would define it, and now you're you were a material heretic back in the day, you know. Whereas if you continued to hold that after they defined it, if they defined it later, then it would be more clear you're a former heretic or not once it's decided. So you are kind of positing material heresy as a way to lose your office, and I'm kind of curious about that because it seems like it's something that's more common than I mean, at least the way I understood the term, it's actually very common because it's, you know, in regards to both history and the fact that, you know, so many people just don't know the faith that deeply, and it's even kind of hard to know high-level theology.
Absolutely. Well, what I would say, first of all, is there is a difference between someone who is a Catholic with an erroneous opinion is not the same thing as a material heretic. And I get into this in the introduction to my book, but also in some of the later chapters. And I'll just give you a definition from one of the theologians. So a person who chooses not to assent to what the church teaches is a heretic. If this choice is subjectively sinful, the sin of heresy is formal. If this choice is not subjectively sinful, the sin of heresy is material. If they have not, in fact, chosen a different rule of faith, but are merely in error as to what the church teaches, they are not a heretic at all.
Okay.
This is the silver bullet. I'm announcing this on your show, Tim, for the whole world. This is the silver bullet against 1958 sedevacantism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I make the argument, other people have made the argument, that Bergoglio and Prevost have chosen a different rule of faith. In the book, I reproduce statement after statement from Pope John II and from Benedict XVI, where they affirm the immemorial magisterium of the church. You won't get that from Prevost or from Bergoglio. Okay. So therefore, the Vatican II popes are legit, and I argue that Francis was a heretic, and Prevost is very suspect of heresy.
Okay, thank you. I guess I just kind of misunderstood what material heretic, or at least what you meant by it. So that's good. Thank you. All right.
Also, Cardinal Below has a definition of a similar definition of what constitutes an innocent person who's just an error versus a material heretic versus a formal heretic.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining the show.
Okay, well, thanks again, Dr. Edmund Mazza. This was always good food for thought and lots of logically coherent thoughts strung together. I'm going to have to think about a lot of the things you've said.
Thanks, brother.
After every show. Yeah, go ahead and tell us where we can sign up for your fall classes.
Yes, I am very excited about this. We're starting a little earlier this year. It's 3 12-week classes. You don't actually have to attend because I'll send you the videos. We're going to start the second week of August. And the first class is Italians Who Saved the Church. And it's because it's the 800th anniversary of the entry into eternal beatitude of Holy Father St. Francis of Assisi. So it's a big deal. I was going to put as the subtitle for this, well, the title again is Italians Who Saved the Church. And the subtitle was going to be, you got a problem with that? No. I can get away with that because I'm half Italian. The second class is going to be, and this is really, if you sign up for this one, you get the whole roller coaster. Tim, just a couple of weeks ago, you did the young Earth, old Earth debate. We're going to get into all of that. It's science versus the Bible. So Big Bang, multiverse, evolution, Noah's flood, the whole 9 yards. And then the last course that we're going to be offering is Eucharist, Salvation of the Faithful. And that's quoting St. John Bosco, who had a famous vision, a dream, where he saw Eucharistic devotion and Marian devotion as the two pillars that were helping the bark of Peter during the assaults of the Antichrist. So if you have lapsed Catholics, or if you're friends with non-Catholics, we're going to go through scripture, the early church fathers, the saints, Eucharistic miracles, the Eucharist as mentioned in Marian apparitions. This is going to be the greatest course, hopefully, that we've ever done on the Eucharist. So yeah, go to edmundmaza.com. We got a special right now if you sign up by July 29th. And if you take all 3 classes, there's a substantial discount.
Excellent. Everyone go get registered for 1, 2, or all 3 of those classes. While you're at it, click the like and subscribe button. Dr. Edmund Maza, thanks for stopping by again. Everyone go pick up the book that we've been talking about. We want to hold that up, Ed, one more time.
Yeah. Saints versus Antipopes.
Versus Antipopes. Thanks a lot. God bless you, Ed, and everybody out there.
God bless.
Don't fall out of the bark. God bless you all. Day is full.